For just the third time in history, an Australian club has made it to the final of an Asian continental competition. Beating Kyrgyzstan side Abdysh-Ata Kant 3-0 on the night after a stalemate in the first leg, the Central Coast Mariners became the first and last A-League team to make the final of the AFC Cup. The third game with final in its name, but the last final, trophy time. Possibly just 6 games of football away from a historic treble, the competition for the best campaign the A-League has ever seen grows thinner by the week. We'll break down the game, delve further into the Olyroos' thunderous exit at the Under-23 Asian Cup, and pay tribute to a retiring great on this episode of the A-Leagues of Our Own podcast, presented by the Inner Sanctum. My name is Lachlan, Avil, and joining me today is Jacob Stevens. Hello to you.
Hey, Lockie.
And Christian Montegan. What a significant night of football it was for the Mariners and Australia on Wednesday night.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Looking forward to diving into a bit more of the game, and also, like you mentioned, a legend retiring. Close to our hearts, lucky with the Melbourne victory, but yeah, we'll get into it.
Yes, well, we will go, of course, to our game in focus, which is the Central Coast Mariners 3, Abdysh-Ata 0. Jacob, you and I watched this on the live stream the other night. It does finish 4-1 on aggregate as well, but tremendous win from the Mariners, making history seemingly every week with what they're doing in the league and Asia at the moment. Just a wonderful win, a wonderful night, and a huge crowd as well in Gosford. I know it's just slightly lower number than 5,000 pales in comparison to the A-League, but in terms of midweek football, it's up there with some of the biggest we've ever seen.
Yeah, there was a really good turnout, and a good turnout from the travelling supporters as well.
Absolutely.
There was a massive bunch of them making a lot of noise, really bright and colourful, which is pretty awesome to see, especially considering how far they'd have had to come and the sort of convoluted journey that they'd have taken through Dubai and stuff like that because of the flights. So, no, it was a really good crowd to see, and it makes sense for such an important game in not just the Mariners season, but like you said, in Australian football. You know, it's now the Mariners are, have that chance to go on and win an Asian title, which there's only one other club here that's done that before. It's an absolutely huge opportunity for them. And I know that, Will has obviously had his reservations about it all, but the way that they've been playing recently and their performance in this game, I think that everybody in Australia would be looking towards that and thinking that the Mariners could quite easily come away with a win.
Yeah, and Christian, people will obviously point to the fact that this is not the Champions League, it's the second competition, but we've seen Australian clubs struggle so much travelling in Asia. It's its own beast in of itself, regardless of who you're playing at the other end of the plane flight. It's just such a big achievement to go this far, and especially with the travel issues that they had in the away leg as well. It just shows how difficult competing in Asia can be, and a marvellous achievement.
Yeah, it's a sensational achievement. Yeah, should fully be celebrated and appreciated, because I think it's the first time in 10 years an Australian club has made a final of an Asian competition. So, I mean, just given the dark times that the club were faced with, only a few years ago, and then to the point where you were sort of questioning if there's actually a future for them in the competition because the states were so dire. But, to see the way they've been able to pull themselves out of the doldrums, and then it's just a testament, I guess, to how well they've been able to produce, young talent and, run a football club in the right manner, which I guess, many clubs here in Australia should be taking as many notes as possible. I know even when, you look back before the season commenced, they lost Nick Montgomery, their manager, obviously majorly influential to the side winning that grand final. They lost Jason Cummings, Silvera, Triantis, and I think a few others as well. So also with that, lost the first 4 games of the season. They were sitting bottom of the table, and then, to not only make the AFC Cup final, just in the fashion that they have, but also to compete in 2 competitions at the same time, just shows the amount of squad depth that they do have. Yeah, I think it's just been, again, just an amazing achievement. I remember a few months ago when I interviewed Montgomery, he was at Hibs just starting out, and I asked him about the Mariners' poor start. I think it was after when they went 0-4, and I asked him if he was worried at all about the state of the club and if they may, regress back down to the mean. And he was fully adamant and confident that, the Mariners would, find another gear and, find their confidence and belief again, which I guess just shows that confidence that his club's instilled in everyone. So yeah, massive achievement again. Just great to see.
And of course, that success of last season, Jacob, brought so much change, as Christian's mentioned, which only elevates the performance that they've had this season. And, people forget that they came in this season with so many unknown names, all of their foreign players. They lost Tulio halfway through the season, so much adversity that they've had to come through as well. And now they're only 6 games away from locking in 3 major trophies. It's extraordinary to think.
Yeah, it just comes back to this idea of belief, not just from, the club and the staff and the coaches, but the players themselves as well. If they have the belief that they can perform at a really high level and they can play really good football, and they've shown that that's the case, then they can go on and they can do this sort of stuff and get themselves to finals and put themselves in a position to win silverware consistently. And I think it's really sort of the blueprint that a lot of clubs should be following, the way that the Mariners have been able to turn themselves around. Obviously, the laughing stock of the league almost for a few years there, where it was, you'd almost pencil them in every season to finish bottom. And now, they make some smart decisions. They make the tough choices of cutting players who aren't good enough. It's this sort of stuff that we don't see enough of in the league, I don't think. And the Mariners are sort of paving the way to show other clubs how to do it, because not all the clubs have, the financial resources or the facilities of a Melbourne City, and it takes smart decisions, backing yourself, aspiration, and then, coming back to that idea of just belief in yourself, belief in the team that you can have these performances and that you can win games.
And, you brought up the financial aspects. They bring these players in, they often get good sell-ons. Christian, this game was also worth 1.15 million Australian, about 750 US is the number. They can double that if they go on to win in the final in a week and a half's time. That money means so much as well. There's just so much coming good for the Mariners at the moment.
Yeah, again, it's great to see. I mean, we've spoken in the chat a couple of days ago about, having to, sign players in these long-term contracts because, the talent that the Mariners are producing, for example, you've got Adelaide United, they're losing these young talents pretty early and not getting, I guess, the financial incentives that they should be deserving for their efforts, for, the academy work they're doing, the coaching, all that stuff. So to get this type of money just to, I guess, reinvest in their academies, because that's basically the number one key for the clubs like these Mariners and Adelaide's of the world. So, I mean, again, really great to see.
Well, in terms of the game itself, the first half started largely in favour of Abdysh, to be fair, Jacob. A little quirk of this game was that they had to play in last year's kit that was brought in on short notice by their club president because their actual kit got lost in transit. So not the easiest of situations there. But refusing to sit back away from home, they really did bring it to the Mariners. Probably unfortunate not to lead early, but in the second half it was Miguel DiPizio as the hero came off the bench and scored 2, and what a night for him as well.
Yeah, in terms of that first half, it was pretty much a continuation of what we saw in the first leg. Both teams sort of set up in similar ways. Mariners with their back 3, of course, the big major changes there, Jacob Farrell in and ALOO in as well, both back in the side, which I thought might have given them a little bit more stability, which they struggled with in the first half, especially playing out from the back, but it didn't seem like that was the case last night. I mean, we spoke about Lockie during the live stream. A lot of what the Mariners were doing in that first half was just turnovers and turning the ball over in that central third and trying to win the ball back as quickly as possible. And they were doing that very well, but it was then the case of not being able to actually do anything once they got the ball back. And Abdysh-Ata, like you mentioned, they didn't just sit back and try and see it out and maybe go to extra time and penalties. They knew if they were going to win, they had to score. And so they were trying to get forwards as quickly as possible. That's where a lot of those turnovers came from, was just sloppy passes, not making the right decision in the centre of the park, that sort of stuff. When they looked the most threatening was when they were getting the ball into the half spaces, which is something that I've mentioned a couple of times as a Mariners weakness over the last few weeks. They've defended really poorly in those areas. And Abdysh-Ata, when they did get the ball into those areas, that's where the majority of their chances came from. And you'd say in the first half that probably Abdysh-Ata were the better of the two sides. But then, like you mentioned, Lockie, the Mariners came out in the second half, switched about 50th or 60th minute to 2 at the back in possession rather than the 3, and things really sort of opened up for them. And then it was that introduction, like you mentioned, of Miguel DiPizio, which at the time, I think we almost missed. I think Paletti managed to just catch it a couple of minutes after he was brought on, and turned out that he was the hero of the night. Some fantastic football from him. And it's one of those ones where, as a manager or a coach, you make those subs and you hope for the best. And when they come off, you look like an absolute genius. And I think that's the case with Mark Jackson here, was that he had to try something because the game was at a complete stalemate at that point. Obviously, a few moments earlier, there was some interesting refereeing calls, which I'm sure we'll touch on in a little bit. But no, it was the exact change that was needed. And, DiPizio and Docker worked really well together. There was some great interplay between them. And I mean, Michael Docker, for instance, played that beautiful pass for the DiPizio opener, outside of the foot on the volley to play him in behind. It sort of opened the game up, that substitution, and the Mariners were able to capitalize and take the chances when they did start creating them.
Yeah, and Docker, you're right to highlight, I think, a great example of persistence in this game as well. He had a couple of chances in the first 60 minutes, one particular just outside the 6-yard box that was saved on the line, but then got that assist, as you said, received that really nice blind pass from Josh Nisbet as well, cuts inside and scores the second as well. Really well played from him. You brought up the two refereeing decisions. So we've been talking the last couple of weeks about VAR and obviously a lot of people's opinions that it should be gone in the game. And well, here's a very interesting test case for you. So we saw the first one, Christian Theohara should have been sent off with a red card for a high boot that made contact, studs to the face, literally as clear as that. We know in the A-League that would be a VAR red card, no doubt. And then there was another one to ALOO as well, was brought down by the Abdysh keeper outside the box. There was a defender behind, so perhaps you're not talking a red card there. But yes, two very big decisions that probably didn't go the way we were thinking. That's the world without VAR that we're talking about. Is that the world we want?
Well, it's the world without VAR, but it's also the world with a referee who doesn't want to blow the whistle. That Theoharis one, I still haven't, and we spoke about it on the night at the time, have no idea how he didn't give even a yellow card for that. Because we were saying the only way that's possible is that he thought that there was no contact in the challenge. But in that case, he would have given an indirect free kick, but he didn't. He gave a direct free kick. So he knew there was contact, just didn't give a card either way, which completely baffling decision. I really don't understand that. And that second one, like you said, with the keeper coming off his line, which would come back to haunt him later in the game as well, because he made the same mistake for the final goal. He came way too early out to the ball to get to ALOO. Qual gets a toenail on it to just knock it past the keeper, who sticks his leg out and catches him. And again, that one there wasn't even a free kick called for it. It was a couple of decisions and they were right back to back as well, like 30 seconds apart. And I think that sort of kicked the game up a notch from sort of that stalemate that we were experiencing into both teams sort of maybe feeling a little hard done by. Abdysh-Ata probably thought that the Mariners should be down a man, and rightfully would have thought that. And the Mariners would have thought we should have been given a free kick right on the edge of the area here, and potentially even the keeper sent off, depending on your interpretation of the positioning of the other defenders and stuff like that. So yeah, just two completely baffling decisions there. And like you mentioned, Lockie, that's what happens when you don't have VAR. But I think it's more than just no VAR. I think it was a case of the referee just, for whatever reason, didn't fancy making those decisions on the night either. Maybe he's used to having VAR and just forgot that it wasn't there that night.
It's just how those decisions were going to be made, though, because if the ref did have VAR, then it just opens up a whole can of worms. Like if the referee was in a clear position and saw it and still didn't give anything, I know the VAR would have helped in some instances, but it doesn't mean for sure that the decision will be overturned. So yeah, interesting.
Very interesting. Well, two other little bits of news on the Mariners, of course. One key absence was Angel Torres. We mentioned it briefly at the end of Wednesday's show. We have no new information since then. He's been stood down by the FA on a no-fault suspension. We don't know how long that will be for. But yes, no new information on that. But then there's also the matter of playing the final in the AFC Cup. Now, the way the AFC Cup works in terms of hosting the final is it switches every year. The champion of the West hosts it in this calendar year, and then we flip to the winner of the interzonal playoff. So Mariners unlucky in that sense that they're in the wrong year, so it's been hosting by the West. But the team that they're going to play is in Lebanon, and games will not be played there. So there's nothing confirmed out of the AFC yet, but there are some suggestions online by a few people in that part of the world that there'll be a neighbouring country somewhere over there in the West to host the game. But yes, that's still unconfirmed for now. Let's move on to the Olyroos. They will, of course, not be participating at the 2024 Paris Olympic Games, crashing out and hard in the group stage of the Under-23 Asian Cup. Christian, we mentioned this briefly earlier in the week, but we're going to delve into it a little bit deeper here. 0 wins, 0 goals in 3 games. And whilst the short-term consequences of these losses, not qualifying are unfortunate in terms of not qualifying for the Olympics, the long-term realizations are perhaps the most dire.
Yeah, you're right. I guess my expectations pre-tournament were that we weren't going to go all the way, but I sure didn't see us not escaping the group, let alone failing to score a single goal, which is quite extraordinary when you think about it. I think, as the tournament went on, there were signs that the squad was starting to gel more and become more cohesive, especially in that last game against Qatar, where they created an eternity of chances and opportunities in front of goal. They just couldn't take them, unfortunately. So, it's never easy arriving to a camp, not having any game time together, as a whole group, which of course isn't an excuse, but there's been a bit of talk after the dust has settled about, the result being a reflection of the lack of talent coming through. And I saw a piece that Robbie Slater wrote arguing that exact same point. And I mean, it's easier to instantly turn to that directly, but, I just agree with it because, it's one of the best generations of talent I think we've produced in a long time. You've got Toure brothers, Milanovic, Jacob Farrell as well, who's had a terrific season with the Mariners. And then obviously, the ones who weren't there, Irankunda, Gauchi, Chikati, all these players. So it's not the fact that we're not producing the players. I just think we also have to take into account, the players who weren't allowed to join the Olyroos due to, club commitments, the Irankunda issue, which, I think it's pretty separate. I think the issues lie much deeper than just what happened there. I think also one of the things, it's maybe just internally a coaching thing, not to, put too much blame on Tony Vidmar because he has been involved in the setup for quite a while, with the under-17s. He's been assistant for the senior national team as well. So it's not like he doesn't know what he's doing. He hasn't been picked off the street. He's been in the setup, but I don't know, is it the way that we're, coaching these young kids coming through? Is it the program design, the structure of it? Do we have a set blueprint, where these kids can follow for a long-term plan? Yeah, it's just a bit difficult to put your finger on it because I think we do have the squad and the talent, to be performing better. So it must be other areas where, we need to be doing better and have a real look at.
Yeah, so there are, of course, as you mentioned, a couple of caveats to this exit. We did essentially have to send most of a second string team. You mentioned some of the names, but almost 6 or 7 players that would be locked on to start in this team were not allowed to play by their European clubs because the tournament fell outside a FIFA window. I agree with you, Christian. The handling of the Irankunda situation was poor. I gave them the benefit of the doubt when that news first broke, but then to go back around and say, actually, on second thought, we might take you, I thought that was pretty poor. And yes, they didn't have a lot of prep either, going into the tournament. Those actual players wouldn't have played together too much, but there are definitely deeper issues at play here. You mentioned Tony Vidmar, and as the coach, he does have to shoulder, obviously, some of the responsibility for this, but I do agree that the issues run deeper than that. And, this isn't a unique scenario for us. We've talked about both senior national teams, the Socceroos and the Matildas, really struggling with a lot of possession. And to borrow a line from Vince Rugari, who wrote the other day, when asked to play as the dominant team in possession, Australian teams have shown they really don't know what to do with it. And I think that's pretty apt. It feels like this is a development issue, at least looking from the outside. And the good news on that front is that change is in the works. Yoni Merrick, the former Melbourne Victory championship winning manager, he was hired as the chief football officer at Football Australia almost 2 years ago now. The Sydney Morning Herald is reporting that FA with Merrick are preparing to unveil a new 10-year technical plan, which includes an overhaul of Australia's youth development systems. And Jacob tacks on the ambition of turning the Socceroos into a top 10 and Matildas into a top 5 team in the world for their respective categories. So there is initiative being taken in this department, and perhaps this result at the Asian Cup for the under-23s is just a continuance of an issue that's run in Australia for quite a long time.
Yeah, I think you're both pretty spot on with your observations there, and I don't think that this idea of, the Socceroos being top 10 and Matildas being top 5 is particularly outlandish. I think it's entirely possible with the quality of players that are coming through. It's a case, like Christian mentioned, though, of I think it might be a couple of problems with just the way that they're trying to play, and you mentioned Lockie as well in terms of playing possession-based football. Sort of the national teams look a little bit lost when they're trying to do that. And I spoke about on the live stream as well about how I think it might be a case of almost sort of coaching these players away from using their natural abilities to create chances and to play the way that they know how to play and the way that they're comfortable playing. I think it's trying to sort of fit them into this mold that, you may be taking away from the natural talents of some of these players, and that can be a negative thing because you get a lot of possession and you control the ball, but you're not creating chances because the players aren't able to use the skills, the technique, the abilities that they have. And that can be really harmful sometimes. So I think it might be a case of almost overcoaching them a little bit and not letting them have that freedom to play football and create chances and just be clever on the ball and do their own thing a little bit. And yeah, I mean, you said there's a bunch of issues around it, second string team, lots of players missing, not a lot of prep. But in international football in general, that's always going to be the case, and especially when it comes to Australia, how many times do we talk about, players not being able to play for Australia, or, there not being enough, friendlies in the lead up to a competition or something like that. It's a consistent issue. And, it's one of those things where, yeah, hopefully Ernie Merrick can sort of look at how things have been done up until this point and identify where these issues are and put in plan to rectify those issues and make sure that it doesn't happen again, but also set things up nicely for the future. Like I said, not like I said, like you said, Lockie. I'll just take credit for your stuff. No, but yeah, like you said, setting up those development pathways and things, and overhauling the way that Australia develops their youth products, I think that's going to be absolutely key. And like Christian said, we've seen that there are enough quality players at this age level and even younger. The under 17 side is incredibly talented as well. So yeah, I mean, there's no reason why these aspirations aren't possible. It's just about, making sure that the plan makes sense, works, and can be applied effectively.
And if I can throw out another observation out there, I wonder if it's just an Australian sporting cultural thing as well. Forgive me for a brief Sharon violation, but we talk about other codes like AFL and NRL, the two biggest in the country. It's all this talk about, having strong defensive structures and not conceding and defense win championships and all that kind of thing. But Christian, I find it really interesting that the two people almost that are really trying to lead the charge of this new direction are Ernie Merrick, who is originally a Scotsman, of course, and I'd argue as well Tony Gustafsson, who is Swedish. And we've seen the Matildas at least try to evolve their game over the last 12 months, specifically after the World Cup, to a team that is more capable to break down teams when they have high amounts of possession and, creating new ways to attack in the final third and break down teams as well. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, you might have a point there, to be honest. I think what frustrates me as well, with the possession point, if you see our players aren't particularly comfortable, with having a lot of amount of possession or, not comfortable with a certain game style, then is the plan to just teach our kids the same way each year, 4-3-3, 4-3-3, this same sort of notion, is it possible to, mix it up a bit, teach these kids to play different formations, adapt in different positions, just get them a bit out of their comfort zone early so that when they do arrive in the environment for, under 23, or under 17, whatever it is, that, they're adaptable and they can sort of, play through a bit of adversity. I just think we're coached too much one-dimensionally. I think, just playing up look back as well, for instance, constantly, having this constant motion, we've got to play out from the back at all costs. We can't play a long ball ever. Like, you got to change it up from time again. And I think we look a bit at, Ange Postecoglou and the way he plays, and, he's always persistent on playing the exact same style, which is, fair enough. It's gotten him to the point he is today, which is, fair play to him. But I just think we just have to open our minds a bit to, play a few different other ways rather than, just sticking to the same style every single time.
And I think that the developments we're seeing actually in the A-League in that regard could sort of spur that on a little bit quicker and help things out, especially because of the number of these young players that we have coming through the A-League now. Having coaches like Mark Jackson, Giancarlo Italiano, Alan Stajic, that are in and around working with these players consistently and have that sort of tactical nuance and that ability to change things around and get players more comfortable with sort of that unpredictability. I think that could be a really big thing, because the criticism has always been of the A-League that it is, like you mentioned, Christian, very one-dimensional. It's very physical. It's maybe not as technical as other leagues around the world, but I think this year especially we're starting to see a little bit of a change there. And if that continues, then I think that will also help speed up this process for the national teams.
One other observation: Mark Jackson, English.
Yep.
Interesting. All right, well, let's go to an Australian and let's talk about Leigh Broxham, because he's a Melbourne Victory legend and he announced his retirement this week. Christian, 384 games, 4 championships, 3 premierships, 2 Australia Cups, 1 Mr. Melbourne Victory. You don't see one club players like him too often in world football, let alone the A-League, which is, renowned for being this revolving door of players going in and out of teams. It is remarkable, the story that he's had playing at Melbourne Victory for 18 years. It's just amazing. I know you and I have fond memories of him as Melbourne Victory fans, but what a player, what a contribution to the team and what a contribution to the league.
Yeah, terrific servant, obviously, to the club. Like you mentioned, 18 years. I mean, that's just such a substantial amount of time to be at one club. Obviously, we don't see it as often these days, unfortunately, with the transfer fees and, all the money flowing away in the transfer market these days. You just can't control that aspect of, the loyalty factor that fans, I guess, want to see a bit more of nowadays, rather than, players, switching here and there. But yeah, Broxham's just been amazing, amazing servant. He's been able to adapt in so many different positions. I saw Postecoglou in his message to Leigh yesterday. He said, I remember I tapped you on the shoulder in training one day and I told you, can you play centre back for me? And Broxham just had a bit of a shock on his face, I think, to say, oh, me, centre back. That's true though. He's playing so many different positions, whether it be fullback, centre back. He's playing the midfield a bit as well. And yeah, probably the best memory for me was that goal in the grand final to seal it against Sydney. I was there in the stands and just the crowd, the atmosphere. Just no better play just for that moment. Just, like I said, just a great ambassador for the club. He's just, wore his heart on his sleeve every time he stepped foot on the pitch. Even in the past couple of seasons where, he hasn't been a regular starter, he's still been, a club man, leading the way through his leadership. So yeah, he's going to be sorely missed.
Yeah, I know, for the last few years, the story around Leigh Broxham has always been, okay, he's on the bench for the first game, but who's going to get injured in the back 6 and who's he going to have to step in for the next few months? He was that kind of player, always filling holes. That was a really nice moment, that goal, of course. One that really sticks out for me, and you're going to find this strange, in the first Melbourne derby of the year, he got his first little cameo off the bench, and obviously a huge amount of people in the stands, and he came on, and within 30 seconds, he made this big crunching tackle down on the byline to prevent a cross coming in, and the whole South End went up chanting his name, and just a terrific reception for him, and his service to the club. It was great. It was a great moment.
Yeah, 100%.
Jacob, if you had anything to say.
Yeah, obviously as the Adelaide fan in this podcast tonight, look, I'd never want Victory to do well, but it's hard to begrudge a player who's stuck with one club their whole career and for such a long time, and to be so successful doing it as well. And Broxham, to me, I think represents sort of the last of the old guard there at Victory. Throughout everything that's happened at that club, he's always been there. And it's difficult with the rivalry to see, faces changing, players changing, coaches changing consistently, because you have to learn to hate a whole new bunch of people. But, with Broxham, he was always there. So you could always fall back on that. And, it's going to be a shame to not see him there, like you mentioned, whether it's on the bench, making a crunching tackle on the field, whatever it is. But no, I mean, yeah, a tremendous career, and best of luck to him to whatever, post-retirement life holds for him.
Yeah, hopefully he stays involved in football at the very least. I'm sure the people at Melbourne Victory will be happy to see him around as well, if not on the field. Let's move over to some news for the NST, or should I call it the Australian Championship. The name was leaked. This is credited to Joey Lynch. He found a trademark application by Football Australia for the words the Australian Championship, which has sparked this conversation. We hadn't quite known what the competition was going to be called. Christian, I don't mind it. I think it's all right. I think I like the idea of the A-League too, when that becomes a connected system and pyramid, and probably if the competitions are owned by the same people as well. But that can't happen right now. And, the term championship is recognised globally as a kind of second tier in football, obviously with the English comparisons. So I know some people are talking about maybe some confusion between, obviously the winner of the A-League is called, the championship, the champions, and whatever you want to say. But I don't think it's that big a deal. I like the name.
I'm not overly fussed when it comes to these things about, names, different competitions. It's like, as long as we have the competition in the first place, I mean, that's the starting point. Arguing around these sorts of things. But, I mean, even like calling it the championship, obviously with England, you've got the championship, which is the second division over there. So maybe it'll work well in that sense that a lot of people associate, English, the championship as a second division, and maybe it can, I don't know, maybe pull a few eyes and a few more viewers to the league, But yeah, again, I'm not overly, fussed or concerned about, a name, just as long as, we get the game off and running. That's just the main thing.
Jake, are you as name agnostic as Christian is?
I do like the name, but I do think that there are certainly bigger issues to address when it comes to this competition, than what it's going to be named. So, glad that got done. Don't have to think about it now. Let's focus on the stuff that matters.
Of course, that's not confirmed either. I'm sure there's still wiggle room to change that. But yes, that's the suggestion at the moment. In terms of the real news then, we do know that the request for proposal phase for the other 2 or 4 teams is now closed. That happened earlier this month. FA have said that they're going to conduct the rest of that process in private. So the completion phase is scheduled for June of this year. So hopefully only a month and a bit, or perhaps 2 months away from finding out the other teams that will take part in the NST or the championship come April and May of 2025. But let's look ahead to this week's A-League action, and we're going to go around our panel for our burning questions. Now, I have given this to you two without notice, so I'll kick it off while you two decide on something to say. But I'm going to go for the obvious one out the front, and that is, will the A-League Men's Premiership be decided this weekend? Of course, we've got the concurrent games between Wellington and the Central Coast. We do know that Central Coast have another game to play midweek against Adelaide United, but there is still a good chance that the Premiership plate will be raced. Credit to Piney on Twitter. He has confirmed that the Premier's plate will be in Wellington this weekend. So if the Central Coast Mariners win, they'll have to wait until midweek to raise the trophy. But I think that's probably the right thing to do given the situation. So Wellington are trying to pack out their stadium. They're letting kids under 18s, I believe, go free into that stadium, really trying to pack it up. And hopefully it'll be a night to remember for them. And if not, Central Coast gets to do it all over again in midweek next Wednesday, which is the fixture as well. We are going to do a live stream as well, by the way. Just a quick plug for that, those concurrent games. Super Saturday, we're calling it. Bring back that into the A-League. But Christian, what's your burning question?
Like you said, you put me on the spot here, Lockie, but I'll go with, will the Jets spoil the Mariners party in the F3 derby? I've said it for a couple of weeks now. I think this could be the banana skin for the Mariners to, drop some points in, what will be a Jets home game. Jets in, relatively good form. Obviously held off Wellington as well last week to get a point off them. So I think they're definitely a dangerous threat. They can definitely, cause a dent in the Mariners' sort of Premier's plate hopes. And it should be a pretty intense and entertaining watch.
Absolutely. Jake.
Mine is one which you actually posed to me before we started the recording, Lockie, and that is, will Adelaide United lose any more players? It's been just the last few weeks has just been another little mini exodus for United. A lot of rumours swirling around about some other players that might be leaving. A lot of people off contract, so it's going to be an interesting end to the season to see, what the squad looks like come grand final day, and who's actually left remaining.
Yes, it's been very interesting to see. Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of a bonus one as well. And my question is, who will play in the A-League Women's Grand Final? Of course, we've got the second leg of those semis this weekend as well. Melbourne City hold a 3-0 win over the Newcastle Jets, but the Jets have been known to score a goal or two in their time, so they'll come out firing. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing the pair of Serena Bolden and Melina Ayres-Christian start in the same team, which we haven't seen much this year, so that will be good. And then, of course, Sydney FC with just a 1-goal lead over the Mariners as well, so that game is delicately poised, but definitely looking forward to those as well.
Yeah, definitely. We're calling it Super Saturday for a reason, aren't we? I think with the Jets, it's very hard to see them coming back with 3-0 deficit. Like you mentioned, I think they definitely have to start with Bolden Ayres up top if they've got any chance of, sort of salvaging anything. Because in these types of games where, we've seen over the years, whether it be overseas or in Australia, if you want to come back from these sort of deficits, you have to score an early goal. Just score an early goal, put the pressure on your opponent, and then from there, I guess, anything can happen really. So, yeah, I still expect City to go through. And then in the other game, I'm going to probably go with just Sydney, but only just. Another tight affair, maybe a goal in it for Sydney. But yeah, very close game. Cool.
Yep, the safe bet for sure. All right, that will do for this episode of the A-Leagues of our own podcast. Be sure to like the episode, give us some reviews and comments and all that good stuff. But Jacob Stevens, thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me, Lockie.
And Christian Montegan, thank you.
Thank you, Lockie. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll be back on Saturday, as we said, for that watch along on YouTube. But the next podcast will be Tuesday for your regular A-Leagues men's review. Thank you all very much for listening. Goodbye.